Stop motion animation actually is three-dimensional model animation. The word animation has always been associated with the animated cartoon.
Stop motion animation is where you simulate motion by stopping time. What you do is you have a puppet and you animate it incrementally, one frame at a time, capturing one frame of film for each movement. And when it's run at 24 frames a second, that series of still frames simulates movement.
It's a lot of time and a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, the first examples that we saw as children were on television. Art Clokey's Gumby comes to mind, which was clay animation. He animated the little green figure and his friend Pokey the horse.
I remember seeing The Lost World when I was very young. My parents were great cinema goers. The Lost World was an early project in stop motion. It was a silent film, and that made this process much more popular. People remember The Lost World for the dinosaurs, but not for the people who were starred in the picture. All the dinosaurs look so real compared to using other forms of making dinosaurs, like men in suits. The models in The Lost World were all jointed. They had a skeleton of ball and socket joints, and then they were covered, the muscles and outer structure was all basically rubber, and then they would put a skin texture on the models to give it a sense of realism.
Stop motion was always to bring a fantasy element to motion pictures, and I guess Willis O'Brien took fantasy elements, brought dinosaurs to the screen, brought the gorillas fighting dinosaurs to the screen. Then the ball was picked up and carried on by people like Ray Harryhausen, Jim Danforth, David Allen.
Willis O'Brien inspired a lot of people, Ray Harryhausen in particular. It was inspired by King Kong, which was like his masterpiece.
Willis O'Brien was best known for his work on King Kong. Willis O'Brien did the technical work, and he created stars out of these puppets. Character like King Kong, you could put slight human traits in the character all through the film, but you try to put little human touches in it so that the audience can identify with what you're trying to accomplish on the screen for this particular character.
It's amazing that King Kong would be considered a classic over all of these decades now. I mean, how old is it? 1933. And once I hit the island, it was just nonstop action until I came to New York. But I think it was the fantasy element, the fact that you had this fantastic fantasy creature walking down the streets of New York City. I think that kind of twist on reality was really remarkable, and I think it affected a lot of people, us in particular.
Making a stop-motion figure is quite complicated. I know in my early experiments I made the armatures inside, which hold the pose in wood, and it was ratchet. Willis O'Brien made them in metal, and I tried metal, and it worked beautifully. And you could get a smooth movement by moving it frame by frame, making the hands move every inch. It's not everybody's cup of tea. A lot of people don't have the patience.
Yeah, it seems the common denominator, it's all excruciating. The process is literally handmade frame by frame.
The frame by frame aspect is 24 frames a second, and how much time you spend to get to the next increment makes the process possibly excruciating.
All right, why don't you take a shot?
It can take as much as 2 seconds to move the puppet, or as many as 10 minutes, 15 minutes, sometimes an hour. If you imagine Ray Harryhausen, animating 7 skeletons and checking the background plate, there must have been 20 minutes, 30 minutes, who knows how many minutes between each exposure. He supposedly only got seconds a day in a full 10-hour, 12-hour day.
Stop-motion models are considered puppets. Puppets in the past has always been associated with the hand puppet, like Beanie and some of the early hand puppet shows, and that goes back to ancient Greece. They're called puppets because they're a small version of a doll.
And you look at Rankin and Bass, little wooden puppets, very much like toys, and they were just kind of carved and sculpted out of wood. And the faces didn't move, they didn't express, but they had these little appliques that they would apply to make them express. I think what makes their specials really special, at first I'd say, was the technique. Seeing these little toys coming alive was magic, because you knew they were little figures, little tiny toys on a set, but they were moving around. But I think what gave it the longevity was the story and the characters and the songs. I don't think the technique alone would have made it last and be as popular as it is alone. I think it was great characters, great story, and really wonderful music.
I believe in Santa Claus, but there was a time I thought I had grown too old for such a child.
You know, it's funny, when I think about their performances, it was kind of funky, you know? They were, but yet it did manage to capture the charm and the individuality of each character.
Yeah, technically, I can't say that Rankin and Bass is the smoothest stop motion you'll ever see, but there's something about the character, the way they looked, and the voice characterizations that just make, again, the whole package come together. There were holiday specials, so it was a special time of year that you would sit down with your family and watch them on television. So there was something beyond the great specials. There was something about a sense of, you know, community and family, that you were watching it down, because there was no videotape, there was no DVD when they came out. You had to sit them down with your family and watch them on network television.
Hi there, little fella. Can you spare a moment?
Stop motion and Christmas are sort of synonymous. They belong together because of Rankin and Bass.
Santa woke for the night, feeling things weren't right, and he was heard to say,
Get the reindeer hitched up, Mama. I'm getting up. Get those gifts loaded up on the sleigh.
It's very difficult to say what makes stop motion appealing. I get a lot of fan mails from young people who say they prefer seeing a film of ours rather than the computer animation.
And I think they do feel that it's something physical and real moving on a stage magically. And so I think it's going to energize a new generation. It's going to keep the cycle going to another generation. It's going to go on forever as an art form.
Well, as an art form, it's here to stay, because storytelling is the name of the game. How you tell that story is up for grabs now. We keep adding new techniques, but we always have the old ones.
That's right. The technique does not become obsolete because a new technique comes out. Just like painting didn't go out of style when photography came into play, and television didn't put radio out of business. Well, CG is not putting stop motion out of business either. It's just a valid technique for telling stories. It always will be. And here's a fun part, the performance part of animating, where I will become one with Santa. I am Santa.
To me, the whole point of making a film is a story. To tell a story, a comprehensive story, in a way with a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's the basis of storytelling. So the story, to me, has always been the important part. So it was a great experience to work with these other people who help bring fantasy to life for the audience.
Yeah, it's magic. I think it's truly magic.
Animagic.